Right. Hello, everybody. My name is Maurice Jones with. Whatever. No. Oh, sorry. We got like a lot of things going on at once. But hey, everybody. My name is Maurice Jones. Here, my beautiful wife. She's working the controls right now. But this is the conversation, something that we just started up very recently, and I'm super excited about tonight's conversation, where we just have an open platform. We can fellowship and talk about the things that people aren't ready to talk about yet. And tonight's subject is suicide, depression, and the church. How should we approach this conversation? What strategies can we help to improve people that are dealing with these things? And I've one, just to be honest, I've never really dealt with that. So I brought some friends on here that are experts in their field, to give you perspective on this very subject, working both in the body and in that field of profession. So I'm gonna go through the panel real quick. We're just everyone's gonna introduce themselves, tell a little bit about their background, anything else they want to share, and then we're just going to jump into the conversation. So let's see here. Anyone can start off.
Hola. I'm Ashley Bell, and that is all. All right.
Anybody else?
Rachel?
Rachel Towns, I'm licensed clinician with the public health facility, probation, parole, mental health, and substance abuse services.
Tiffany or TJ, either or.
Hi, I'm Tidra Martin, and I am a 20-year veteran of United States Army. And yeah, I have personal experience with this subject, so it'll probably be really good perspective to hear it from other people too. So nice to meet you.
Peace world. My name is Ashley, but everybody knows me as Epiphany. I am a spoken word artist in the community. I really am all things creativity. I'm also a middle school English teacher. So I'm very excited to be joining the panel tonight and be given just some insight from a different perspective.
Awesome. So what I'm doing right now is I'm sharing this so other people can see it from their pages. If you guys have a quick moment, if you go on your phone real quick, share it to your page or your account. That way people can join in. And let's see.
And again, I'm Tierra Jones. So you guys didn't see me when he introduced me. I was just a phantom of your imagination, but I'm doing multiple things, trying to make sure that we can reach a lot of people, because I really feel that this subject is not talked about in our communities like it should be, especially like as a Christian-based community, as different races. There's so much that we kind of sweep under the rug, and I'm glad that we have this opportunity to put it in some people's face, so to speak.
Yeah. So I'm going to start off with the first question, just to get the ball rolling here. My first question for this very subject is, in your personal experiences and opinions, how do you feel the church does in regards to handling suicide and depression?
Okay. I guess I'll go. In my opinion, I feel like the church sometimes makes suicide and depression such a bad situation that we make it almost like a sinful condition, as if like if you're experiencing these things, you're not living holy. If you're experiencing mental health symptoms, then this must be a curse from a sinful life or God's response to your sin, rather than understanding that depression and suicidal thoughts are human conditions that we battle. We do live in a fallen world, and much like hypertension, diabetes, and other physical ailments, mental ailments do come up the same way.
And I would like to chime in also on that subject. I think from my experience, it's been suicide and depression is looked at as a spirit, and that you've been mingling and you've been playing with other spirits. Exact words from people that actually told me this, that you must have been playing with other spirits and stuff, and one of them got inside of you, and now you need to fight that spirit and get it off of you, so you won't be feeling like that anymore. So they didn't understand that I actually been diagnosed with major depression myself. And it's actually nothing. I've actually had doctors tell me, like, I would tell them that nothing in my life was happening to make me feel this way. And that's when they started telling me that it was actually something in my brain about how it's wired or whatever, that I was born like that. So it's more of there's nothing that I can really do to stop it from happening. So it just comes, whether everything's going good or not, it just comes. So it's a condition that I have to actually take medicine for. And it was just something I've been diagnosed with, but I could never really come to the church with it because I was always criticized and said, like I said, it was a spirit or whatever. So I'm glad we're having this conversation.
I'll chime in. I think the church is progressing. I don't think that we've kind of nailed it or got it nailed down across the board. But I think that the church is progressing. And I think that if we can get everybody on board to say the same things and give the same resources and give the same support, then it'll be, the church will be a place where people will go to, because right now a lot of people do run for the simple fact of what teacher said about, it's called a spirit, or, it's you've done something to have these feelings or these thoughts.
Yes.
Oh, okay. Hi, everybody.
Welcome.
Thank you. I think like Epiphany, right? I think like you were saying, we're progressing, but I think it's going to be people speaking up about it, because the church is very dismissive in our community. When it comes to mental health, when it comes to depression and suicide, we don't talk about it. And part of it is destigmatizing it and saying, yes, in our community, we have depression. In our community, people do commit suicide or attempt, and have open dialogue and conversation, and separate it from the religious part of it. And it has nothing to do with faith. We all have faith, but like the other young lady was saying, we're in a fallen world. And so we have to operate in that and know that, yes, we believe in God. Yes, we have faith, but we also have a variety of other things that are happening, and we have to acknowledge them. And I think platforms like this are a great way to start, because we have to have people like boots on the ground that can go in and say, I'm a Christian and I was depressed, or I'm a Christian and I tried to kill myself, right? So people can see that it does happen in our community, and that we need to have open dialogue, and it starts from the top down.
Oh, hi. So I wasn't going to say anything, but as I was sitting here listening to everyone, I believe that because we were made in the image and likeness of God, we are spirit first. And so with that being said, studying the word of God and knowing that Judas committed suicide, that Elijah wanted to kill himself under the juniper tree because he was running for his life. I do believe that these are spirits, like, because we live in a spiritual world. However, in the church, it is taboo. You can't go and tell your pastor, I'm having suicidal thoughts. You can't tell the church mother, I'm dealing with depression. And Rachel mentioned, different physical ailments, and much like you will go to the doctor and say, I'm having headaches, or I have high blood pressure, what have you, and they will tell you A, B, and C to do to handle it, to get a grip on it. And I think that when it comes to mental health, the church doesn't necessarily believe that you need A, B, and C to get a grip on life. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, they automatically say, okay, it's a demon, exercise that demon. And ultimately, I do believe that, but you have to live life. Like, you have to, there is no help to deal with the things that are going on in your life, to cope, or, you know what I'm saying, to get through, to overcome. And so I think that's definitely an issue. I'm just going to say that with the church, is that one is looked at as taboo. And so if you can't talk about it and you're bottling it up, you can't begin to handle it and deal with it. So
Right, I'm going to jump back in very quickly. I want to go back to what Marsha said about us being able to have conversations.
Yeah.
I think those conversations need to be like transparent conversations that create safety for people, because I like something like depression. And the crazy part about it is a lot of people don't even know that they are depressed, right? And so like, or if they do, there's such a shaming that comes along with it to even open up to that point, you know. And this is like based on life's experiences. This is based on how you've opened up before and maybe you've been shut down. Like I believe a transparent conversation will be more effective because it'll create that safety. The person needs to know that, hey, this is okay. While it may not be a normal for everyone else, it is a normalcy that a lot of people that you don't know have. And then, you know, these are the strategies that we're going to take to walk you out of this.
And I would say too, sometimes it's like a generational thing, and I know I don't want to fall back on that, but when you think about your grandparents, you didn't know health-wise what kind of sickness they had, what was going on. Everything was hush hush. You barely knew what your family history was when you're thinking about health overall. And so growing up for them, everything was secretive. You kept to yourself. Even if you had depression, even if you were dealing these things, everything was just, you don't say nothing, you don't bring family business out, all these things. And so those are the mindset that generation has. And even for our parents, so sometimes these people that are in leadership, that's where they're coming from. They're coming from a time where you kept that stuff to yourself, and they don't know necessarily how to deal with it. They don't understand it. And I know for me, when I was growing up in the church, and I believed this, that it was like I categorize all depression as a demonic thing until I got mature. And there is a spiritual aspect, and we're not gonna really talk about that tonight, but there's some spiritual aspect, because I'm really big into understanding spiritual warfare. But there's another part that you can be Christian. I experienced postpartum depression myself. And so I didn't step outside my faith. I didn't, do all these things, but that's all I'm gonna say about that. But there's a question that I want to present that you guys didn't get, but we have some people on Facebook that are asking these questions. And the question is there a distinction between depression and suicidal thoughts? So I'll let whoever wants to start off answering that question.
I can answer that. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
So is there a distinction? So you can be depressed and not necessarily have suicidal thoughts. However, depression can be like one of the comorbid factors of suicide, but they can exist separately. So just because you're depressed doesn't mean that you're having the ideation of wanting to commit suicide. I think that it can happen, and definitely people typically have had some depression or in a depressed state when they go to commit suicide, but not everyone that's depressed is going to commit suicide or even have those thoughts, because there's situational depression, there's different levels of depression, and then there are the extremes that sometimes would cause somebody to have those thoughts.
I have a little bit of background in crisis work, and sometimes it's understanding the different parts. So as Ms. Marshall was saying, yes, there is the difference between depression or depressed mood and suicidal thoughts. But within suicidal thoughts, there's suicidal thoughts or ideation, there's suicidal intent, and then there's suicidal like access to actually carry out a plan. Oftentimes we use those things simultaneously. So if someone's having suicidal thoughts, that means they actually have an intent or means of executing that plan. Because suicidal thoughts can be transient during a depressive episode. It doesn't necessarily mean that person has an active plan, nor do they have means. You have a client that may say, I'm just so overwhelmed, I wish I could just, blow my brains out. But that person doesn't have access to a gun. They have ample, family support around to watch them and support them through this process. That's someone that is less likely to complete suicide versus someone who's isolated, alone, and actually has access to gunfire. So understanding those things, sometimes the moment we hear suicide, we run because nobody wants to be responsible for talking to that person last if they've screamed suicide. But actually, that's a time for us to come closer to that person and offer some alternative measures of support and things like that. So yes, they are definitely different pieces. And suicide is not just isolated to depression. It can come with schizophrenia, schizoaffective disorder, delusion disorder, dissociative disorder, PTSD, trauma. Almost every diagnosis in the DSM-5 could possibly lead to suicide. Even substance abuse could lead to suicide. And it doesn't mean that that's a human failure. It means that things have progressed where that person feels overwhelmed. Because the way our good Lord made us, we are made to preserve ourselves. So the moment you feel like it's better for you to die than to live, that means that something has gone completely wrong.
And just to kind of make a statement about suicide, and I think it's important to bring up, and maybe you'll talk about this later, but I think it's important to have the dialogue and to empower people to have the conversation about suicide. What are the warning signs? What are the things to ask? Because a lot of times in our community, like she said, we run when we hear suicide. We're like, oh, I don't want to talk about that. Oh, no. And the thing is, if somebody mentions it to you, we need to empower our community to say, okay, let me ask the specific questions. Is this an isolated incident? Like you were saying, there's like a series of questions, but we have to stop being afraid to say suicide, because this is the myth. If we ask the question, we think that's going to make them go kill themselves, and it's not. Just because we ask the question, are you having suicidal thoughts? Do you have the means? Have you thought this way before? You know, you go through a series of questions. It does not mean they're going to go and do it just because you ask them these questions. And that's the fear factor that is in our community, that if I say, or if I even ask you, are you thinking about killing yourself, that you're going to go and do it. And that's not true. And we have to, you know, all of us are in the position where we can start to empower and have those conversations in and of our community and in our church. We have to talk about those things.
Assist training, that's what she's asking for, everybody. Just throw that out there, it's a resource. Every local public health facility does offer assist training free to the community so that we can empower friends and family and loved ones to have that conversation and to know what actual precautions to take. So it's called assist training.
Yeah, and I'm actually assist trained qualified because I took it while I was in the military. And one of the reasons I took it because I want to know more about it. Coming from a perspective of somebody who deals with depression, sometimes it's hard to explain to people, especially, and I'm grateful that we do have you know, people on the line that's your field, but we have to be careful even with your field, because I have dealt with counselors that if it's not in a DSM-5, then they kind of discharge and they'll try to fit it in there, if that makes sense. So it won't always be a black and white. It's not always in the book. It's not always you'll know this by diagnosing this, because I dealt with it. That's how I know. So it's more of a talking to somebody and knowing, because there are times you may not even know somebody is, I mean, I had to deal with that. I had to deal with where I had a guilt trip that I was really putting on myself. I didn't know the guy was suicidal. I was the last person he talked to. And the very next day he killed himself. I blamed myself because I'm like, why didn't I see the signs? Why didn't I see? He didn't have any signs. Some people don't have signs. They may just decide in their brain that, oh, this is what I'm going to do. And sometimes it takes a piece of the puzzle together, because me coming from the military community, that's why I come from that perspective also. A lot of them deal with it. A lot of them deal with that particular thing because they have PTSD. They have all this trauma they've been exposed to. And I think sometimes we expect for it to be A plus B plus C plus D, and it's not always that way. So I have took it upon myself to talk to soldiers and say, hey, how are you doing? What's going on? Because sometimes they're smiling, they're saying everything's great, but inside they're actually suicidal. They want to kill themselves. I've had soldiers come to me and say, hey, Sergeant, yeah, last night, thank you for saying hello to me. Thank you for telling me that I'm special, because guess what? I was going to kill myself last night. But because you talked to me and you actually made me feel like a person, I decided not to do it. So that's the advice I would give to the professionals that's on the line, to please make sure that we actually look at it from talking to that person and getting on their level and understanding, and not necessarily saying you guys are doing it, but for future reference, just in case you may have that client that comes up. It won't always be a black and white thing. Like, it's good to have the knowledge, and you know, with knowledge, we'll say, hey, we know how to do this. We know how to deal with this. It's not always that way. Sometimes it may be totally left field from what we're used to. We just have to talk to people, and discernment does come in when it comes to things like this. You have to have discernment, because sometimes I'm telling you, it will not be black and white.
I'm gonna segue back to church with what Tidra is saying, because she's talking about the military and working in the military hospital. I used to work in the ER, and I would see this all the time, but I'm going to segue back to the church. The same thing she was saying about people coming in and they're smiling and they look like everything's fine, but we can very much get caught up in the routine of church, and people are hurting and broken and crying on the inside, and we can just look right past them. They could be singing in the choir, on the praise team, preaching in the pulpit, because I don't know if anyone has noticed, there has been a rise of pastors that have been committing suicide in the church. And it's like we are used to these titles and these roles, and our humanity is broken. And I think that it definitely, what Tidra was saying, that discernment. But if we are who we say we are as the body of Christ, your first priority is to love. And so we are, I think, mixing a lot of it, because like I said, there were a lot of times internally I was like, I just want someone to see me. Like nobody, and they would ask that quintessential question, how's everything at home? And I'm like, fine. And really be like, no, it's hell at home. And I need you to give me a hug. You know what I'm saying? And it's like we're so caught up in the routine things, things that happen in church. And yeah, like we need to take the blinders off and pay attention. So
I'm gonna go to the my next question, because you're kind of leading into it. Since Brian, you just joined us, say hi to everybody. I'm gonna let you start off, and then I'm gonna go to Epiphany, and this way y'all can get in there, and then everyone jump in after that. But my next question is, just from Ashley's point, how could we do a better job of addressing the issue? Because we know we need to address it in the church. But what are some things? Because we know people personally that dealt with depression, dealt with suicide. I'll give an example. When I was younger, probably one of the most phenomenal friends I had. She was awesome, happy. Like whenever you see her, she put a smile on her face, and then she overdosed on pills. And then of all the people in the church, that was the last person you would suspect would have done that. And so we gotta look for those signs, but and the sermon is definitely a part of it. But what can we do now that we know the church needs to put more focus on really dealing with it? What ways can we do that? And we'll start with Brian.
Hello to everybody. Well, first, man, this has been so far very educational for me, because I'm not an expert, and I'm just well versed in communicating with people. I would say doing a better job. I think we've gotten away from just being present with people. We've had, a lot of people, we're on the go so much. We got so much things going on. We have social, we have family life, we got work life, we got all these different things going on. And we've seen the lost touch and with being present with the people in the room, being present with the people that you see on a daily basis. And we can sometimes familiarize so much that we miss out on what's going on with people. And like I've heard a lot of you said, just also listening, not with intent to always give an answer or presume or assume that you already have the answers for people, but just listen with an open ear and listen, just be able to listen and empathize with people. You may not have ever experienced what they've gone through. You may not know exactly what to tell them, but I think as human beings, the one thing we all know how to do is love on somebody, and just be an open ear to people, and not presume, because a lot of times we tend to do that. We tend to already jump ahead of that person and say, well, this is what you need, or this is what you're really trying to say, without us even letting them, share their heart with us. And so, I'm not coming from a, a background of, addressing these issues all the time. I just know that I do know how to communicate with people, and I spend time with people and deal with people on a personal level. And not to say that I know how to navigate these conversations all the time, because I don't. Because there's people in my life that I don't know how, because I don't understand everything about it, and I don't think that we're so complex as human beings. You never will fully understand, whether you're a minister, a elder, a prophet, or anything. You will never fully understand the complexities of a human being. And so I think it's just super important to make sure that we're listening to other people.
Okay, so I had to write mine down so I wouldn't forget. So I've got 3 things. I think that, so as a teacher, I've learned to deal with humanity differently, right? And so I've learned to just have so much more compassion for people and also myself. So the first thing that I have is that in order to help us be progressive as the church, I think that the first thing that we have to learn how to do is to teach people how to process their experiences. Because a lot of what goes on is a lot of stuff that they didn't talk about in their past. Like you said, a lot of generational stuff, a lot of conversations their parents never had with them. They struggle, and I might be getting just a little bit off here, but they struggle with things that they don't know why they struggle with it, and so then that brings shame. Then that brings fear. Then that brings all those things. You know what I'm saying? So it carries, it stems from the experiences. The second thing is, I think in order to be progressive, it'll be good for us to teach them what balance is. We talked a lot about everybody has, workloads, and with that constant on the go comes overwhelming. And when you are, and some people live performance-based lives. And so if they're not performing, they don't feel like they're doing enough, or they don't feel like they are enough. And so what we have to do is teach them the balance of not performing and just resting. Like, rest is a part of God's plan for our lives too, right? Like, he built, after he worked, he rests, right? Everybody knows that 7-day creation, and on the 7th day he rested, right? So we need to teach them how to have their 7th day. And then the third thing that we need to do is we need to teach them that it is okay to express more feelings than just anger. And so this is where my students have taught me how to have more compassion for humanity, because I mean, sometimes they just snap, and it takes a conversation to get to, okay, I know that you're acting this way, but what is the feeling that's driving the action? And so when we get to the feeling that's driving the action, what happens is we are able to better assess, right? So, okay, I know that you're feeling this, and you're not wrong for what you're feeling, and you may not even understand why you're feeling this, but there are other ways that you can, express that feeling. But again, they've had us in like these trainings for like trauma sensitivity, and so all of the studies have shown that anger is our first light. A lot of people will revert to that anger emotion first, before sadness, before fear, before anything else. They will revert to anger. So if we can teach them how to, okay, yes, we already know, as like all bucks, anger is coming. We know that. But when it comes, how do you respond to anger? Like, how do you teach anger its place, and then get to the root of that emotion, so that what you do is now you're creating a healthy emotional balance.
That is excellent. That's all I wanted to say.
Oh, go ahead.
I'll jump in. Those were both excellent points. Just for some context, I actually work at a church in the mental health department. So my church, we have a mental health department. I am one of the counselors on staff at our church. So with that, one thing that I will say, a couple of suggestions is, one, we have to start in our churches with our leadership. It starts from the top down. We have to start having those conversations, and we have to start normalizing mental health. We have to start normalizing it to the point where we're having conversations about mental health, just like we have conversations about our aunt got the sugar, right?
Yeah.
We got to have those same conversations because for years, from generation to generation, we put Uncle Joe in the back because he's crazy. And we send the food back in the back and we don't think about it. We don't talk about it. Uncle Joe's back there because, something's wrong. We need to bring Uncle Joe to the front, have conversations and talk about it. So we have to start normalizing it and kind of piggybacking on what Epiphany said, those feelings, those emotions, allowing ourselves to know when we feel something, it doesn't make us weak. It doesn't make us less strong. And it doesn't mean we don't have a problem with our faith. We are going through something in our mental health. It's just like diabetes. It's just like cholesterol, high cholesterol, heart disease, all of those things, mental health, well-being or disease needs to be normalized. The other thing is self-care, which I think you had talked about, but making self-care part of our daily practice. We talk about, like, all my clients, they all have a self-care plan because it's really important to normalize that. Self-care is just not the manis and the petties and the massages. It's your devotion. It's your worship. It's connecting with the spirit, right? So we have to normalize that and make it accessible so people know if something's off. Who can I go and talk to? Who is my team? Who is my tribe? And of course, active listening. I'm sorry, Brian, like Brian was saying, we've got to connect. We've got to stay connected, especially during COVID. We've got to reconnect and find a way to check on everybody, even your strong friends, right? Everybody has seen that thing. Check on your strong friends. It's not always just the ones who you see look like the poster children for whatever that mental health issue is. It's the strong people too. It's the pastors, it's the leaders, it's the one who's, bearing the brunt of everything on their shoulders. And then training, again, bringing in trained professionals, bringing in people who've experienced different parts of mental health and showing a face so that you can see, oh, there's somebody that looks like me that was depressed. Oh, there's somebody who looks like me from my background who attempted suicide. And there's a relatability there.
I'm going to jump in for like 15 seconds. Just to piggyback off of what Marsha said, that it starts with the leaders. I'm an advocate for emotionally healthy leaders, though, that are actively practicing that, because I know for me, like before, like I'm to a place where now I can talk about, my feelings, my vulnerabilities, everything. And I can say, I can make light of it, but still teach people how to treat me where it doesn't make me shut down. But before I got to that place, what I did was I sat under my pastors, and literally before I could talk to them, I could watch them. And I think it's more important that if we could watch leaders be healthy, if we could watch leaders have healthy communication, if we could watch them and build that trust with them, then we'll be more willing to have that conversation. And yes, that self-care practice is one thing that my pastors, like, from the jump, they were like, okay, let's get you together, because you've obviously, there's a lot of imbalances here, but they helped me along the way. Not only did they help me, they actually lived that life. So
I just want to say this real quick, like what Epiphany was saying, the transparency of the leadership is essential. That's one of the reasons why we have a mental health department. Our pastor got up in the pulpit and made a whole statement and even shared some of his own, mental health things, not like mental health, just that he had, gone through some things and been to therapy. So I think if you can see it and it's from the top down and it's normalized and it's okay, right? Then it trickles down into the church, it trickles down into the community, and you can respect that. You can say, wow, they're human too, even though we know it. Sometimes we need to have those reminders.
Yeah, I think,
So,
and I think.
Never
Go
mind.
ahead, Ashley.
No, you go ahead.
You go.
Y'all go.
You go. No, I was just thinking like another aspect, like I think it was Epiphany that talked about balance. And the Bible says that charity begins at home and spreads abroad. And I think that we were talking about earlier how it can be generational. I think Rachel said that. And because my parents were taught that children are seen and not heard. And, I grew up where your emotions didn't matter. Your feelings didn't matter. If you didn't have problems because you're a child, you know. And so even though I was going to church, I was raised in church, I'm, you know, third or fourth generation Church of God in Christ, like these issues weren't dealt with and they were swept under the rug. So as an adult, you know, between my husband and I, we are the chain breakers, the generational curse breakers, because we chose that the buck would stop with us, that this toxic behavior wouldn't occur in our home. And so, you know, that we were going to have that balance, that we were going to talk things out, that we were going to, as Epiphany said, express our feelings to one another, that we're not going to hold things in, so we can have a healthy environment, you know, so even when our children come, they will know that their feelings and their desires and their hurt and whatever else matters. And I think that's a big thing, is that, like I said, that we weren't raised with the concept that how we're feeling is important, you know, because our parents weren't raised that way. So.
Okay. You want to say something on
that? Yeah.
All right. You're going to say something on that, and then I'm going to do my bombshell question of the night.
I agree with you 100%, Ashley. Like, that was a big thing, that kids weren't allowed to feel certain things. And we actually do that with our children. But then the hard thing is when you have grandparents that are in their life that have that same kind of style that they had with you, and they're trying to do the same thing with your children, and trying to find that balance of, okay, this is not how we're doing it with them. We're trying to change something in them so they will be able to express more. And I feel like that, and it's not just us, there's other people I know that are in that situation. And how can you deal with that? Like, what is the appropriate response to separate, or to, what am I trying to say? To just deal with it. How do you deal with that?
Well, see, I'm a bit of a thug, so I've developed. I've developed a bit, and Rachel is my sister, so she could tell you. I've developed a bit of tough skin. So whatever goes in the Bell house is what goes. Mommy, daddy, grandparents, whomever, I will protect my children. And if your behavior is toxic, if I deem it or see it as toxic, I have to protect my family and my children. And that's, you know, that's all I have to say about that. So.
Can I say one thing?
Definitely.
I wanted to go back when we talked about how can we progress as a church. I think one of the things, two things. One, we have to stop separating them. We separate mental health and our faith all the time. And I happen to be one of those therapists that I do encourage my clients who are of the faith, talk to your pastor. It's not just a one-stop thing. Sometimes I feel like in church, we make people believe either you're going to go the spiritual route or you're going to go the clinical route, and you're going to go to them people and get help. But it's not two separate things. You know, they work hand in hand with each other. And I think as professionals, it's our job to equip the church and support the church with the support they need and resources they need. Oftentimes, sometimes it's not because the pastor don't want to talk about it. They don't know how to talk about it. They don't know where to tell you to go. They don't know where to. So what they do is they lean on what they know. So we make it our responsibility to provide them education and resources on what to do that can help merge that gap. Then secondly, I feel like because I'm also a believer, so one of the things we have to do is take on our responsibility, because there's organic mental health and there's environmental mental health, which is those mental health disorders that derive from complicated home life situations and prolonged stressful situations and complex trauma and relational trauma. And one of the things we better realize, faith without works is dead. We can't shout it away. We can't clap it away. We can't musician it away. But until we do our responsibilities to our families and to our children in our own home, so they can have support, so they can be heard, so they can be emotionally validated, so they can be appreciated, so they can have an improved self-image and have a good God image, then we're setting them up to have faculties like mental health illness and substance abuse and things like that. Okay, I'm done.
You had to talk. Okay.
Yeah, because did anybody want to talk on that? Because I have a question to put on the table. I was debating if I wanted to make this a part 2 or not, so y'all can let me know. But Ashley kind of touched on it. You kind of touched on it too. Because we really talked about the subject of suicide. We really talked about how we deal with the church. But I'm a big person on, if there's any situation that someone's dealing with, we got to cut the root. And so what happens though in this specific category is that it gets swept under the rug, and church or no church, we let and somebody brought this question to me on another topic I was doing, and they said we let them get away with it. And so I was gonna bring that question forward. Like, I don't know if y'all want to make this another conversation,
Bro.
but
Bro.
stop letting stuff get under the rug. And I'm just give an example. When I was in college, I had a lot of friends. I'm not just and for the sake of conversation, I know I have a lot of women on this panel, but not just women, but women and men. I would say about 80% of the people that I had conversations with on campus were either molested, raped, or something, and their outlet was partying and drinking. I was there partying and drinking with them, but they had that root, and when they're in that vulnerable moment, and you got that ear. Oh, this happened to me when I was younger. But families, we can be on here having a conversation and be like, yeah, we got to do this and this and this, and it works. But I mean, I don't want y'all to raise your hand, but how many of y'all got like a old friend or a cousin or uncle that did something that nobody ain't say nothing about? And so we're here ministering. So it's like, how can we have that conversation right now, or?
Bro, that's
a part 2.
Okay.
Bro. That's a part 2.
That might have to be a part 2. That one could go deep, like for real.
Yeah, and I think it's important to tackle that because, and it's just like, I think there's some fellow therapists, you got to tackle the root. If you don't tackle the root, it continues to stay there, right? It's going to regrow. You can pull it up, but if you don't tackle that root. And so I think everything that we're talking about is really, really important. And you can treat that, but if you don't treat the root, it's going to come back. That same issue is going to circle back. And in the Black community, in our churches and our families, like you said, we sweep that under the rug. I mean, and I think everybody in here, like you said, has had somebody that knows somebody. It's like, don't talk about it. Even our own I mean, I've had people come to me in therapy and say, my mother knew and wouldn't say anything.
Yep.
Or my mother knew and she told me to be quiet. And so now you're left dealing with that root. You gotta dig the root.
Rip it, destroy it.
I think we have to talk
about it. Now, in the conversation, can we also talk about verbal abuse, physical abuse, psychological abuse? Because I wasn't, thank God, I wasn't molested or raped. However, I dealt with all of that in the home, and people saw it, and this was up until I was a grown woman, still living at home, and nobody said stick, stack, or spaghetti about it. Everybody told me to shut up. Everybody was like, well, you know how they are.
Yeah.
At the expense of my mental health, so it was very much a thing that was just like, it was I grew up Church of God in Christ. I knew pastors who were straight up whipping their wife's house. And nobody said anything. It was right, like straight up Ike Turner and their behinds at home. And it was just, everything's cool, so Yeah, we can dig into that for real.
The biggest thing
I'm
with
all the
is
way
about
in.
transparency.
I gotta table that because I wanna wrap you I wanna wrap it up here. So just to give you guys a idea for next week, we're gonna do the same subject, but cutting the root. That's gonna be the basis, cutting the root. We're gonna look for the signs because you guys mentioned it earlier, and I wanted to kind of go deep into it. What signs to look for, how to approach it, and then what the Bible says about it. And so like how can we deal with it from a biblical stance? So those that want to join next week, we're gonna deal with the root and how to destroy it with the word. But I'm gonna let everyone.
Can I throw something else to add for next week too?
Yeah.
Men and their mental health, because that we really don't talk about.
Oh yeah. They're gonna throw that in there too. So take some notes, send me some questions. Y'all all got my information now. But I'm gonna have oh yeah, having a form of godliness. That was good. I just saw it in the comments, but I'm gonna have everyone kind of give like one thing, one seed, one nugget that's gonna get people through this week until the next week, until we have our next conversation. So I'm gonna go Rachel, Marsha. Did I say it right?
Marcia.
Marcia, Epiphany, Tidra, Ashley, Brian. So give me like your big advice to end the night with.
That's a really big pressure cooker. To end the night, I would encourage everyone to seek God first. Because I think sometimes we make it seem like it's a simple 1, 2, 3 answer. Whether I believe as believers, we're to pray for whether we're seeking a new doctor, a new pastor, a new dentist. So I pray that you seek God first for your direction, and ask God to direct you on how to get your healing and what steps to take to get your healing.
Was I next? I lost track. I would say develop a radical self-care plan. Check in with yourself and check in with yourself in terms of what's right, what's not, what's feeling good, what doesn't feel good, but really, really take some time out for self-care. And I mean deep self-care, spiritual self-care, devotional self-care, and some of the other parts of self-care that we know about, but take time out to tap into self and take care of yourself and share that with others.
Definitely. I think my biggest takeaway or what I can leave with everyone is be open to growth and seek that knowledge, right? And so it's because like lack of knowledge causes people to perish, and perish doesn't always mean that you died a physical death, but there are things that you can miss out on for the lack of knowledge that you have, right? And so I would say be open to growth and just seek God for that knowledge, and be open to how that answer is coming. It's not coming through it's not always going to come through a conversation with somebody. It may just be like a piece of paper or so. I don't know. I don't want to get too technical, but be open to growth and seek knowledge.
And I'm fourth, right? The main thing I want to leave is that it's okay. When people are feeling ashamed or they're scared to talk about something, they don't have that safe place, they will hold things in. And even if they need help, they won't get it for the shame and the ridicule that they'll go through. So I would lead to it's okay. If you are dealing with something, your mental health, you would take care of it just like you would your physical health. It's very, very important. Don't try to hold stuff in. Don't try to sweep it under the rug. Don't try to say I'm strong and I got faith so I can do this. No, you don't. Sometimes you can take the cape off and say, it's okay. What we call in the Army, take a knee. Sometimes it's okay to take a knee and say, you know what? I can't deal with this on my own. It has nothing to do with my belief in God, but I do need additional assistance, or I might need an extra self-care or whatever the case may be. But whatever you need, get what you need. It's okay.
Ashley.
I would say pray, study the Word of God, and one of the greatest tactics I think the devil uses is making you think that it's only happening to you, or you're by yourself, or it hasn't happened to anyone else, and that's not true. We are all in this together. And so if we learn to have a heart for one another, and like I said, to love one another, then we we will remember that even in the dark times, that I could call my sister or my brother, whomever. And if, I think that if we know that there's someone there for us, then we can collectively be better and do better. So, yeah.
I agree with it. What everyone said. I'm just gonna second what Rachel said and see God. Um, that's and also to let go of things. One thing I would say is seeking God. That's where we get our true identity from. Who you are is not your past. It's not even your current situation, but your identity comes from Him. So um, that's what I would leave it with: seeking God and um, listen to what does God say about you? What does God say about His people? And leaning more on that, because a lot of times that it's been a lot of times where as people we go through these identity crises, right? We're trying to discover ourselves, we're trying to find ourselves, we're trying to become, and we go into these brick walls, we go in all these several different directions, we take advice from people, and we end up in this, sometimes we end up in the spin cycle of identity. But just going back to just seeking God, because that's the only way you'll truly discover who you really are.
Amen. You want to do yours?
No, I don't. The only thing I was going to add, not anything like that, but those who are watching this video, if you feel like you've been depressed or in a depressive state now, or even having suicidal thoughts, please reach out to either your family or to us. We will be glad to pray with you and connect you with the right people that you need to come in contact with. Our mission, what we live for, is first, all God, everything, but to make sure that the people of God or people outside of God are not lost. We want to have to make sure that we have this kingdom mindset, that we're family, that you are our brother and sister, and we first and foremost want to look out for you, and we do everything in love.
And so I want to thank my panel for an awesome conversation. Like, you guys blew me away. Like, each week keeps getting better and better. And for once I was quiet the whole time, because I was just soaking it all in. And I really appreciate every single one of you for joining in. I don't know what God's taking this thing, but I'm just glad that we started it. So I'm gonna end with a prayer. And if you want to get in touch with any of these people, visit our I.M.A.G.E Inc. page. We're going to share their content like we do with everyone's stuff every week. And those of you that are on the panel, if you do anything specific that you would like us to be involved with or to get out, say, hey, I got this Bible study. Could you share it to your people? Or, hey, I got this business thing. Teacher already know, Brian already know. I got this business thing. Can you get my name out there? We got you. I got some witnesses. I know. I got them. So, but dear Heavenly Father, we thank you for this time. We thank you for this platform. We thank you for those that put themselves aside and stood in front like you did, oh God, for the people. And we ask, oh God, that you just touch those that are listening right now. Soften their hearts that they can be open up to receive you. And if they're dealing with suicide or depression, we just ask, oh God, that you give them a peace of mind and joy in their spirit right now. And if it's something that they feel like they can't handle, and that if prayer is not enough, oh God, send them to one of these people. Send them to someone that's willing to listen, that is willing to hear, that is willing to walk them through the steps to get to a place of restoration, oh God. We give you glory, we give you honor, we give you praise in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen.
All right.
So thank you all, for those who are on any of our platforms live watching this. Thank you for joining. And as always,
be encouraged, be blessed, and be inspired.